Hi, my name is David Truesdale. I'm representing the Pennsylvania Center County Senior Environmental Corps, and what I'm going to do today is provide information concerning how to set up, calibrate, and to use a Hanna HI 9146 dissolved oxygen meter. The meter comes in a plastic carrying case. In the case comes the actual meter, handheld meter. There is the dissolved oxygen probe with a 13.4 foot cable, a 30 milliliter bottle of electrolyte, 2 membrane caps with O-rings, 3 AAA batteries, and the instruction manual. When not in use, the meter should be stored inside the plastic carrying case. It should be kept in an area where you have fairly constant temperatures. So you don't want to keep it in your car in the summer when during the day when it's sunny, or overnight in the winter when it's freezing. Also, avoid storing it in the winter in an unheated garage. The meter is water resistant, not waterproof, so be careful with it. It can become wet, but it's not a good idea to drop it into the water because it's not waterproof. And I would also recommend that you would carry an extra set of 3 AAA batteries with you in case you have a low battery life when you're out in the field doing your dissolved oxygen monitoring. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the batteries. On the top of the meter there's a cap that is an opening for the battery compartment. So you unscrew it by means of a coin, and you place your batteries inside with the positive terminal up. And then you reattach the cap. And there's a spring at the bottom of the compartment, and it's a little difficult, at least for me, to screw the cap on easily. So it takes me a little bit of time to do it. Once you get it started, it works pretty good. Okay, and snug it up. Okay, we have our batteries in the meter. There's a battery symbol located in the lower left-hand corner of the LCD screen, and if it begins to flash, that lets you know that you have 1 hour battery life remaining. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is attach the probe. At the end of the cable is a plug. Also at the top of the meter, where the probe is attached, you have a series of pins. Those pins correspond to holes in the plug. You line them up, push the plug in, and then attach. Okay, now it's good and tight. The probe comes with a protective guard, plastic protective guard that screws off. And also there's a protective cap that covers the sensor. Remove that. The sensor basically is a cylinder. It's composed of a silver anode and a platinum cathode. Those are the two, that's the area where your oxygen measurement occurs. There's a membrane cap that fits over top of the sensor. This cap will have electrolyte inside. There's a semi-permeable membrane at the end of the cap. That membrane allows the transfer of oxygen atoms from the water through the cap to attach to the cathode, and that's where your measurement occurs at the cathode. It also here there's a circular thermistor, and this is used to record your water temperatures. Okay, to prepare this, the sensor, what you need to soak the bottom part of this tip, bottom inch of it, in electrolyte for a 5-minute period. I think an easy way to do it, and it also saves on electrolyte, is you use this vessel, the storage, plastic storage cap for the extra membrane cap. So I'll put some fluid in there. Place the sensor down inside. I don't have quite enough. I'll need some more electrolyte. Okay, now we'll let that soak for 5 minutes. Our 5-minute soaking period is over, so I'm going to take the sensor out of the solution. Now what we need to do is we need to wet the inside of the membrane that's in the membrane cap. Also, there's an O-ring that fits inside the membrane cap. This one already has one in place. So what I'll do is I'll add a few drops of solution, swirl it around a little bit, and discard. Now I'm going to fill the membrane cap. You want to ensure there are no air bubbles on the membrane. So after you add the electrolyte, you gently tap the sides of the membrane cap. You can check for air bubbles. It looks good. And I'm going to do this over the sink. You insert the sensor down inside the membrane cap and then screw the cap onto the sensor. And there's some spillage occurring, which is good, because that helps ensure air bubbles being, if there's any air bubbles inside the cap, that helps push them out. Off the outside, a little shake, and I will check, and things look good. No air bubbles. So now I'm going to reattach the plastic guard, and our probe has been prepared for dissolved oxygen testing. Now we're going to calibrate the meter. I'll show you the buttons that are involved in the calibration procedure. There's an on-off button, a calibration button, a setup button, an up and a down button, and a confirm button. So the first thing we'll do is push the on-off button. And initially what happens, you have an LCD readout, and it gives you some information concerning the meter. And you can't read it because it's there and it's gone in about 2 seconds. Then the next screen shows a battery life percentage. Our screen showed that our batteries were at 100%, so that's good. Now it's in a conditioning mode. COND, and during the conditioning mode there's an X and a weight that are flashing. Those will flash until the meter is polarized. What it's doing is it's running an internal calibration, aligning all the circuits, making sure everything is functioning properly. And that will occur, it'll take a couple of minutes, but after it's polarized, then we can start calibrating the meter. While we're waiting, I'll show you the other 3 buttons that are on here. There is a range button, and that the range button is to change the dissolved oxygen from a concentration to a percent. When you're monitoring dissolved oxygen, you monitor it in parts per million or milligrams per liter. If you would desire the percentage of dissolved oxygen, you can push this button and it'll change from parts per million to percent. Also, there's a light. You push this button, it gives you background light in case that you're having difficulty seeing the LCD screen. And there's an auto end button. If you're monitoring DO and for some reason you're not getting a stable reading, it's fluctuating some, you push that button, it'll give you an average dissolved oxygen over a 30-second time period. Okay, now our screen has gone to a number screen. It actually says measure at the top. The dissolved oxygen is the upper number, and it's in parts per million. The lower number is your temperature, and it's in degrees C. Okay, the first step for calibration is to push the calibration button. You'll come to a screen that displays percentage of oxygen. We're using the slope calibration method, and that method calibrates the meter in air. When you do that, you need to change the percentage of DO from 0% to 100%. And to do that, you hit the up arrow. Now we're at 100%, but we have a flashing, well, it changed from not ready to ready. So the meter has adjusted itself to the 100% DO saturation. Next thing we do, we hit the confirm button. And we go back to the dissolved oxygen and the temperature screen. I don't know if you noticed before, prior to what we just did, we changed the percent from 0 to 100%. The dissolved oxygen concentration was 14 point something. Now it's 8.09. That has decreased. Okay, the next step in calibration, we need to adjust 2 parameters that affect the calibration procedure. That would be salinity and altitude. So we're going into setup. So you push the setup button, and the first parameter that comes up is salinity. The salinity is expressed in grams per liter, okay? And it has defaulted to 0. You need to calibrate the meter to, as close as you can, to the salinity and to the altitude of your sampling point. For our purposes, we're in an area where the salinity is very low, where it's all fresh water. When you do measure salinities, there is expressed in milligrams per liter, and they're very, very low concentrations. This is expressed in grams per liter. That is 1,000 times more concentrated than the milligram per liter. So for all intents and purposes, it's a 0. So we're going to leave the salinity mode here at 0 grams per liter. So we're going to go to altitude. You push the up arrow. Okay, the altitude comes up. this meter has been used before. So the last time it was used, it was at a very high altitude, and the altitude is expressed in meters. So prior to your sampling, check out your altitude on TopoMap. It's expressed in feet. Convert that to meters. For our example today, let's say our sample site is at 600 feet. That would be approximately 200 meters. To change that, push the calibration button. The altitude flashes. Now we can change the altitude. When you change the altitude, though, it changes in increments of 100 meters. So our theoretical sample site was 600 feet. We down, toggle it to 200 meters. Now we're confirming that. Hit the confirm button. Okay. The altitude and salinity now are programmed into the meter. Since it's in increments of 100 meters, it could be difficult to get an exact altitude. So you're just going to have to either round up or down to the nearest 100 meters. Okay. Now the meter's calibrated. So to get out of the calibration mode and back into the sample mode, hit the setup button again. Brings us back to our dissolved oxygen reading and our temperature reading. So we're ready to go out and run dissolved oxygen and temperatures. One thing I would also like to mention is when you calibrate the meter, it's best to take it with you and calibrate on site prior to water sample monitoring. Don't calibrate it at the back of your house because you're going to have a time period, travel time. In some instances, it could be 30, 45 minutes, at least for us. So you should take the meter to the sample site, calibrate it at the ambient temperature and at the altitude that you're monitoring your water. Okay, now we're going to check for dissolved oxygen and for temperature. So what you do, when you're at your sample site, you remove the plastic protective guard. And you put your probe in the water. You want to make sure your probe is submerged to a level that it's lower than the thermistor, so you can get a water temperature also. When you're running dissolved oxygens, you need a flow across the membrane. Right now we have stagnant water, so I'm going to move the probe back and forth to achieve a flow. It's recommended that the flow be at a minimum of 0.3 meters per second, and this is because you need to replenish the oxygen atoms in your water supply. When you're monitoring, the oxygen diffuses through the membrane, attaches to the cathode, and it's consumed. So if you don't have flow across the membrane, you're going to have dissolved oxygen drift. It'll decrease over a period of time because the oxygen is being consumed and it's not being replaced. So that's the reason why you need a flow. And if everything's working properly, you should get a stable reading in approximately 60 seconds. That's for dissolved oxygen. It takes a little bit longer for the temperature. And this water, State College water that we have in our sink, is giving a reading of 9.88. Now we went up to 9.92. So wait a little bit longer. Went up a little bit, now it's back to 9.88. I'm going to say that the concentration of the DO in the sink is 9.91. The temperature is 11.5 degrees C. When you're finished with your sample, shake off the excess water. Depending on the situation of the water you're monitoring, if it's turbid, if it's cloudy, it's a good idea to rinse off the membrane with either tap water, distilled water. You get with a squeeze bottle. You just squeeze, rinse that off, then shake that off, and put your protective cap back on. Now, if you feel more comfortable, if you're in the areas with a lot of turbulence and the flow is really great, and you want more protection for your membrane cap, you can leave this cover, this protective guard on, and run your water samples that way. That will still work, and it'll give you more protection. After completing the initial DO monitoring, if you are traveling to another site or multiple sites, you should turn the meter off, because you have a lapse in time between sample sites and your altitude will probably change. So at that time, once you get to your next site, you'll need to recalibrate. As for probe maintenance, you need to be careful with the membrane. Don't touch it, don't bump it. It's fairly sensitive. As mentioned before, ensure that it's not put in a freezing situation, because the electrolyte will freeze and expand. Also, hot situations can cause damage, can cause destabilization of the electrolyte. So keep it in a fairly normal temperature environment. If the sensor becomes tarnished, it can be cleaned. An indication would be very slow stabilization times. It's probably a good idea to change your membrane cap annually, especially if you're in sampling situations where you have water that's dirty, has a lot of turbidity. If the sensor becomes tarnished, it'll become darker, blacker. You can clean that by wiping it with a lint-free cloth, and after you wipe it gently, and rinse it off with distilled water. That's all the information I have for you. So go out in the field, enjoy the day, and have fun with your Hanna dissolved oxygen.